Yo, what's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be counting down my top 10 favorite horror franchises of all time. So a franchise to me is any sort of movie that goes on for at least 2 films. So any sort of movie brand or whatever, at least 2. That's all that it needs to be, in my opinion. Some people say, oh, it needs to be 4. No, as long as there's more than 1, it's a franchise. That is just what it is. That is how it works. So don't try to argue with me. We all have different definitions of things, but that's my definition of a franchise. So any sort of, set of movies that has at least 2 can be included here. We're only doing horror. Of course, you guys know what horror is. There's some things people consider, horror. Some things people consider not as much horror. So like some people say the Alien movies are horror. I think they're horror, but I'm not including them because A, I haven't seen all of them, and B, I consider them more on the action sci-fi side of things than on the horror side of things, so I wouldn't include it anyways. But these films on this list are pure horror. Also keep in mind, I have not seen every horror franchise out there, so stuff like The Conjuring, I watched the first Conjuring, haven't seen the rest of them, so I can't even include that on the list, but I've seen pretty much the majority of the slasher franchises and a couple other ones here and there. And let's just get into it, because my list, I think, is got most of the more popular choices on the list, so I don't think you guys are gonna be that surprised by these choices. You might be surprised by a few, but let's just get right into it. Number 10 is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise. I honestly struggled putting this on this list because there's a couple others that I wanted to include instead, but this one made the cut just because of the original, the 2003 remake, and also the beginning, the Texas Chainsaw The Beginning, the one that came out in 2006. Those are the only 3 that I think are really like solid films in this franchise. I think Leatherface, the one that came out most recently, was good, but it wasn't really a good Texas Chainsaw movie though. It was just a good movie in general, and I enjoyed it, but there was really no big connection to the Texas Chainsaw feel to it. It had the same environment, I guess, and of course it was building up the character, it was the origins of the character, but it was just weird. Whatever. But the rest of the films in the franchise, not a big fan of. Even part 2, I know a lot of people like part 2. I didn't really care for it. Part 3 and 4 definitely didn't care for it, and Texas Chainsaw 3D was garbage. But the original had such a distinct feel to it that was very separate from like any other slasher, because it had this completely new environment in like Texas. And the environment of these movies, why I think I like it so much, is because it's so secluded from the rest of the world. So when these characters get into these situations, they're like in the middle of nowhere. So they can't just like, oh, let me just call the cops. Like in Halloween movies, it's like, oh, you're in a suburban neighborhood, just call the cops, they'll be there in 2 seconds. But in this, they can't do that. So their situation is so much more severe. There's some disgusting stuff that happens in these movies too, with like cannibalism and like just skinning of people, and it's some gross stuff that I think really fits well with the horror feel, but they don't show too much of it in some of them. Like the original, for example, it kind of lets you just make up your own mind on it. It's not really gory by any means, but then of course when the remakes come around, they get a little bit more, more into the gore, but even then they're not like over the top gore. It's not like Saw or anything. So if you're not really in the mood for gore, these movies are still okay to watch, but they still have a lot of gross aspects to them, and a lot of it is like psychologically gross, and I think it works. I honestly think Leatherface is a really solid slasher. It's not that high on the list, hence why it's at 10, but I still like it a decent amount. Number 9 is going to be Friday the 13th. So I think a lot of people probably have this higher than me. I find there to be a lot of movies in this list that get so... I find a lot of movies in this franchise to feel so samey. Like it's the same feel, the same environment, and it's just like... even the story just kind of feels the same for a lot of them, especially in the middle section. But there's also a lot of ones that are standout gems, in my opinion. I think part 4, 6, and the remake are the best ones. Definitely an unpopular opinion, because I know, the first 2 are obviously the ones that probably get the most praise in general, just for being, the first few ones, but I don't know. Those ones I don't really prefer nearly as much as some of the other ones, and even some of the crazier ones like Jason X, of course Freddy vs. Jason, which is more of a Freddy movie than a Jason movie, but regardless, still counts as a Friday the 13th movie, I guess. That's a lot of fun. I think Jason X is one of the most underrated movies in this franchise because it's also a ton of fun. What I like about these ones is mainly the Jason, Jason Voorhees himself. Like, he is the best part of these movies for sure. I think that's probably something I'd say for most of these franchises, but the embodiment of him is just awesome. Like, I think in the first couple ones he wasn't that cool because he just kind of looked like a normal guy with a messed up face. That was it, but then he starts to get to a point after part 6 where he's zombie Jason, because he dies and he gets resurrected. And when he's zombie Jason, he is so much cooler. He's so much more menacing. He almost gets bigger, especially in like the remake and stuff. He looks so much more menacing in my eyes, and I think that's where these movies kind of excel. And I think a lot of the camp aspect of them is fun too, but again, I felt like it got kind of repetitive, especially after the fact that they were pumping out these movies like once per year in the 80s, and it's like, you need to just slow your roll with these damn movies because they're clearly not getting good quality for a lot of them. But these are very campy, very just, throw on, just turn your brain off type movies, and I enjoy them, hence why they're at the number 9 spot. Number 8 is going to be Final Destination. A lot of people recommend these movies to me, and I have to say all the time, I've already seen them all. These are some of the earliest horror movies I've ever watched, actually, like probably 5 years ago, which isn't that long ago, obviously, but I really haven't been getting into horror until, recently all that much. And these movies to me were kind of like hard to watch because it's like they die in ways that is like, it can happen to anyone, it seems like it can, but obviously they're very, exaggerated deaths because there's a force causing them to die in these ways. It's like death. It's the whole concept of these movies is that they beat death. They like skipped death essentially. And so now they're getting punished by dying because they're not able to do that, because that's not how death works. You can't just skip it. If you're gonna die, you die. And I really like that concept. And I think the movies, all 5 of them, I think are at least entertaining. I think the 4th one is the only one that I think is just not really that good. But the other 4 are all good to me, so I really enjoy this franchise. And like I said, the deaths are really hard to watch sometimes because it's like, that could be you. Like the one, when they're driving behind the logs and the logs are coming, and the second one, like, it pretty much it has put into anyone's mind who's ever seen that movie. Every time you're behind one of those things, you have to just move to the other lane because of that movie, even though realistically speaking it probably wouldn't be like detrimental because they don't bounce like they do in the movie, and the one like bounced up and what, but it would still cause some chaos. And I just really like how it's not a slasher killing people in these movies. It's literally just average everyday things in your house. And to me, that's pretty terrifying. So Final Destination movies, they're a great time, and they're definitely awesome if you've never even heard about them. You don't know what they're about, and you just go into it, and you're just like, let me just watch this movie, see what it's all about. That, to me, is what makes these so great. You know what I mean? When you go into these movies for the first time, and you've no idea what the premonitions are about, it's such an experience. Like, I saw the 3rd one for the first time, like, before seeing any of the other ones, and I was just, like, loving every second of it. Like, I was getting incredibly surprised by all the premonition twists and stuff, and that makes for a really good time for your first time watching these movies. So it's one of those experiences that you're not going to get ever again for the first time once you see one of them. And then you see the other ones, they kind of have a formula, and you're like, okay, I kind of get what's going on here, which I think is the only issue I have with this franchise, is that it does feel formulaic in some ways. So I think they should try to break up that formula maybe for future films, because I do believe they're making another one. That would definitely be good, but there still is a formula that I guess they have to keep it as a Final Destination movie in general. Number 7 is The Collector. There's only been 2 of these movies. There's been The Collector and The Collection, and there's rumors of them working on a 3rd one called The Collected, but I've been hearing things like the fact that it's just not really working out. Like, they're just been in production for like a while and they're kind of at like a standstill. I don't know. But regardless, the first 2 movies are fantastic. Like, I really recommend these. These are probably one of the only franchises on this list that I think a lot of you probably haven't seen because it's not a very popular franchise. But I went ahead and watched it recently, the past couple months, I think, and I kind of wish I did reactions to them because, wow, they were damn good. Like, they're not your typical slasher. They don't feel like your typical slasher. They definitely feel a bit over the top, especially the second one. But the first one has such a intense feel to it that I've never felt before in a slasher. Like, I was on the edge of my seat the whole damn time from start to finish. You have this character who is trying to steal from this rich family because he has to pay off this debt, and he gets into this house and then shit goes down. Like there's a killer in there and he set up all these elaborate traps around the house, and he essentially has to find a way to escape, and he can't. He physically can't because there's traps that are like death traps everywhere. So it's like Saw, because they're like, you know, brutal traps. Saw meets like Home Alone in terms of how the traps are designed around the house. And then it also meets like just a general slasher film, because you have a slasher that's in there and he's going around trying to kill this man while he's trying to get around the house and avoid the traps. And the intensity that this movie has because of this is incredibly good. It has got really good like music that kind of builds the tension even more. There's some nice kills in this movie as well. There's some heart to it, and the main character is one of the best main characters in any slasher I've ever seen. So that's a huge plus. And then the second one just takes the concept of the first one and just kind of blows it up and makes it even bigger, even crazier, even more bloodier. And I didn't like it as much as the first one because it didn't have the same tension, the same intensity, but it was still a really solid sequel, and I cannot wait for that third one if it ever actually does come out. Definitely underrated franchise. Definitely go check it out if you haven't already. Number 6 is going to be It. So It, there's been 3 of them. There's been the 1990s, like kind of like a mini series TV thing, I think, but they kind of just put it together now as they call it a movie now. I'm not too sure if it's considered a movie or like a mini series online. I don't know. I've seen it, of course, and it's definitely not as good as the newer ones. I gotta say, this is definitely one of the cases where I think the remake outdid the original. I still do have a lot of fun with that original one, though. I do think it still is very creepy. It's definitely even a little bit creepier than the newer one. The newer one's probably scarier, but I think the older one was just creepier and more eerie in the way that it was made. And of course, it's, you know, based off of Stephen King's novel. And the story itself is pretty fantastic. Like, I love the idea of the story, the way how Pennywise plays off of the characters' like fears, and they all have their own fears that are, he kind of like toys around with them with it. It's not like a slasher film. He's not going around killing people necessarily, but he's scaring the living shit out of them, and that kind of builds off of this character. It kind of feeds him because he feeds off of these kids' fear. And people do die, obviously, but it's not like your typical slasher where he's just got that on his mind. He's just going to kill, kill, kill. No, instead, he's just kind of going there to scare. And I love the interactions between the characters. And this goes for both the 1990s movie and, of course, the newer ones. I love the interactions between all the characters in these. They're very, very well done. I think the newer one, of course, was much better, especially part 1 from 2017. I think that's by far one of the best horror movies of all time, in my opinion, and that's definitely not some opinion everyone will have. That's fair, but I think it is. I absolutely love it. Part 2, I didn't like as much. I think it had this big gap in the middle that was just too much. Like, it was trying to be very suspenseful and slow, but I don't think the tension worked as well as it could have. But then it ended rather well, in my opinion, so I enjoyed it. I just didn't love it nearly as much as that first one. And again, the concept of this, I think, is just so strong. I don't think they need to do another one. I don't really think there's much more you can do with these movies, but if they want to do another film in the future, sure. I don't think they should do it with the same universe, though. Maybe do something completely different, like a spin-off type deal. I don't know, but honestly, I'd be completely fine if it was left there. I think it works well, and this was one of those cases where a remake was needed because that one from 1990, it was good, but I think they could have done so much better, and of course they did in 2017. So It comes in the number 6 spot. In the number 5 spot, I've got Halloween. So Halloween is one I debated on putting it here or a bit lower, actually. I had it, you know, at a lower spot before, but I moved it up a little bit because there are a lot of great Halloween movies that I absolutely love. But unfortunately, there's also a lot of them that are just not good at all. And my issue with Halloween as a whole, right, is what more can you do with it? There's been too many of them. I feel like there's so many things you can do with like other franchises, and this one, it's just like, it's just a guy, an evil guy with a cool mask on that just goes around killing people. Like, it's a fine concept. I can watch these movies all day long, but the problem is the story itself is just not going to get more interesting unless they do something very different with it. But I don't feel like they have. I felt like they've kind of just been doing the same thing. But they've still been doing some pretty good stuff regardless. Like, of course, you have the original, which is a certified classic, of course. And then you start to get to the other ones, the second one, they start introducing some weird stuff like having, Michael Myers be related to Laurie Strode, which never sat well with me. And that plays off into the fourth and the fifth and the sixth. And I like the fourth a lot. Fifth and the sixth, though, they can fuck off. Third one was like weird. I still liked it, but it was just not even a Halloween movie, really. Let's be real here. It wasn't really even anything connected to anything. It was just its own thing, and it worked. Of course it counts as part of the franchise, but it's still like it doesn't even feel like it was. H2O I think was cool, but again, I didn't really care that much for it. I know a lot of people like it a lot more than I do, but it's a fine movie. Resurrection, terrible. The Rob Zombie Halloween movies I thought were fine. I didn't love them. I thought there was a lot of crappy stuff with the dialogue, but the movies themselves had some of the best kills and some of the best Michael Myers moments, in my opinion. And then you have the new timeline with 2018 and Kills. I loved 2018. I thought Kills was one of those movies that had a lot of good kills, but it had a terrible story. So the kills made up for it because it was probably my favorite in terms of the kills out of any Halloween movie. But the story was like terrible. So not terrible. It was not very good. So this franchise is kind of just all over the place with that. You know what I mean? Like there's some really great stuff. There's some really bad stuff. And I just think the overall concept, I don't know how much more it can be explored because I'm not just ranking these movies based on their franchises, but also the potential of them. I don't think this has much more potential. I just don't think it does. I think after Halloween ends, there's not much more they can do. But they will because it makes money. So of course they're going to do something. I just don't know what that is. Hopefully it's a unique idea that works because I don't know. I don't know what more you can do with Michael Myers. He's not very interesting. He just kills people with a knife. He's this evil force. I know. What more can he do? I don't know. And number 4 is Scream. So I'm sure some of you probably expect me to put Scream higher. A lot of you came from my Scream reactions, so you probably wanted me to put it higher. But 4 is still pretty damn high, so you better, accept that. So Scream is fantastic. It is. This is where we start to get these top 4. I think are all like really fantastic franchises. The ones below this were all just solid franchises, but here on out I think they're like fantastic things. We've only had 4 of these. We've only had 4. We have 4 and of course the TV show, which I do count the TV show as part of a franchise, so I'll count it. I watched only the first 2 seasons of the show and I actually enjoyed it quite a lot. Have not seen the 3rd season, probably never will, honestly, but whatever, it's still there. But for the movies, it has probably the best like consistency out of most of these. Maybe Chucky does, but we'll talk about that. For Scream, the consistency in terms of the story and the characters and the way that it kind of all carries over so nicely, I think is really good. I didn't love 3, but that's the only one that really had major issues. I think 1, 2, and 4 are all really solid and don't have really many flaws at all, to be honest. And even 3, even with its flaws, it still carried over the characters nicely. I don't think it ruined the characters or anything. It just had a lot of stupid things in it with like stuff that was specific to that movie. But in terms of what was just carrying over from the first 2, I think it worked fine. You got some of my favorite horror characters of all time with Sidney, Gale, and Dewey. So that's a huge plus. And the side characters are also great as well. The whole mystery of who's the killer is always so much fun to try to figure out and try to like, okay, piece together who could it possibly be. And it usually is surprising. I've really never had a time where I was like, I called it 100%. There's been times where I kind of, was like, oh, it's probably this person, probably. But I never was certain about it. It was always a bit of a shock to me. And I love that these movies were able to do that for me. I really do appreciate how surprising they were. And they didn't feel like, at least aside from maybe 3, they didn't feel like they were out of nowhere. They kind of felt like they worked and they made sense. And I liked how they played out. The kills aren't anything spectacular, but I don't think they need to have spectacular kills in these movies. I really don't care. They're not meant for the kills, really. It's not like Halloween. It's not like Friday the 13th. It's not like the kills are the centerpiece of these movies. It's more based around the characters and the story and the mystery of who is the killer. And I think it works really damn well. And coming to number 3 spots, I've got A Quiet Place. So A Quiet Place is one of my favorites for sure, because the first 2 movies are within my top 10 favorite horror movies of all time. They just are. Some people don't even consider these horror because they're not really scary, and I kind of agree, they're not scary. I don't really think any of these are that scary, but these ones are definitely not. They feel more like action movies in some ways, but even then they're not action packed. I don't know, but they're not like scary is the point I'm getting at. But they still count. They're still partially horror in my eyes, mostly horror, I would say. And there's only been 2 of them so far. I think they are working on a part 3, but man, is it so good. First of all, the concept of it is awesome. Having these monsters, you don't really learn a lot about them, but you learn enough. You learn enough to the point where it's enough to have a general idea as to what, you know, they have to do in order to take them down. And I love how they kind of figure that out through the first 2 movies, how they're trying to figure out what is the best way to take them down. And they do learn, and it's so cool how it connects to the Death Daughter's like earpiece and stuff. Love how that works out. I love the characters, this family here, this really just, you know, well-established family who have very good survival tactics to try to beat this world, because it's this world where these monsters only can detect sound, so they have to be as quiet as possible. And man, Emily Blunt and John Krasinski, so good. The way they play off each other in that first movie is fantastic. And the second one, I didn't like as much as the first, but it was very close to being just as good. Like, it was very, very close. I think they upped the ante in terms of the action and the intensity, but I definitely think the first one's story and simplicity kind of beats it out just a little bit. But man, I can't wait for that third one, because I think it's going to close up this trilogy so nicely. And I hope it does this damn trilogy justice, because man, these first 2 parts are stellar. They are directed so well. The sound design is fantastic. I know a lot of people who are very, very much into the classic horror films are not going to love everything new, but I think even a lot of the fans of the classic stuff still think that this is probably some of the best stuff from the modern day. And in my opinion, it is definitely the best horror franchise from the past like decade, essentially. So yeah, Quiet Place comes in the number 3 spot. I gotta be honest, I had a lot of trouble picking the next 2 spots. If you guys have seen my channel for a while, you probably know my top 2, like which 2 franchises are in there, but you might not know the order. And even I don't know if I can like give the order, you know, accurately, because these 2 franchises I like almost equally. Like, it's really hard to choose. But I'm gonna have to say, for the number 2 spot, I decided to make a choice. The number 2 spot is going to be the Chucky franchise, the Child's Play movies. This is a hard choice. And we'll talk about the first one when we get there. I'm sure you could probably guess what it is, but these movies are my childhood. They are so nostalgic to me, because this was the first horror franchise I watched. I started watching them when I was like 5 years old. It was a long time ago. 15, 16 years ago, and I loved it from the moment I watched the first one. It was scared me when I was a kid, you know, to the point where, because I watched the second one so much when I was younger, loved the second one. It's definitely my favorite to this day. I would get so scared when I got in a car, because I was afraid Chucky was behind the back seat, so I'd always check the back seat to make sure he wasn't back there all the time. And then I went ahead and watched, you know, the other ones, and then the newer ones came out, and I really liked a lot of them. The only ones I don't like are Seed of Chucky and Cold of Chucky. Those are the only 2 I think are not very good. The rest of them, fantastic, really fun movies to watch. And even the remake, I really liked. And this new series they just started, so far, we're only 2 episodes in. I'm loving it. Fucking McDonald's slogan. I'm loving it, okay? So, there's not much to not like with Chucky. But I think the only thing putting it below my number 1 spot is just that the number 1 spot has a couple of movies that I think are like beyond stellar in terms of the filmmaking aspect of them. But these ones have my favorite horror icon for sure. Chucky, of course. He is my favorite horror icon. He is hilarious. Brad Dourif does an incredible job, like, you know, voicing this character. And he's done an incredible job for the past like 30 years now. It's been a long time he's been voicing this damn character, and he's just done a great job for majority of these movies. I'm surprised to this day he's still doing an incredible job with it. Chucky is hilarious. He's a ton of fun to watch. He has a lot of good kills in his movies too. Like, they're entertaining kills to watch, which is crazy for a doll. Then you have Tiffany that was thrown into the mix, and she was great, at least for Bride. I honestly don't think I've liked Tiffany in any movie other than Bride, but she's so good in Bride to the point where it's worth it, man. It's such a worth it character to add, because the way that she plays off of Chucky in that movie is such a blast. I think they need to just do more with that in this series, in the show. But for what we've seen in the past, it's been great stuff. Cursed Chucky was fantastic as well. It was a return to form, in my opinion, after Seed of Chucky kind of was a bit of a failure. But even Seed of Chucky is still entertaining. So even though it's not a good movie, it's still entertaining. And the first three is a pretty solid trilogy. Obviously, the first two being way better than the third one, at least in my opinion. But, you know, that is how it is. The only thing also bringing this franchise down beyond what I just said was Cult of Chucky. I did not like the direction Cult of Chucky was going with it. I was really worried, but thankfully this show was kind of fixing some of my issues with it, but hopefully it does that even more, because, like I said, had a lot of issues with the Cult. And the remake, like I said, it was different. It wasn't trying to be the same, and I kind of hope they play off of that more, because I want to see that story get expanded upon in a future film. I would love to see it. It's so different. It's nothing like the original, and that's the way remakes should be. I love Chucky. I love these damn movies. Comes in number 2 spot. In number 1, Nightmare on Elm Street, the Freddy Krueger movies. So this one I saw for the first time literally within the past 2 years. I've watched all of them. Like, I think 2019, this like fall of 2019 is when I first started watching them, and I'm glad I did, because wow, especially 1 and 3. Those are the two that I think are the best of all of them. I think the filmmaking aspect of them, the kills, the creativity is stellar. I love dreams, okay? This is exactly what makes me so interested in these movies. Is I'm very interested in the concept of dreams. I find them to be fascinating, and I love how dreams can kind of answer questions about like your mental state. I don't believe that dreams, you know, have like a meaning beyond that. Like I don't have like, you know, those all the dreams can be premonitions. No. But what I do believe is that, and I don't just believe this. This is scientifically proven with psychology, that dreams can help describe your mental state. Like there's certain things that might happen in your dreams for certain reasons. Like for example, don't know if you guys have ever experienced this, but if you ever find yourself naked in your dream, often like you're wearing clothes and you look down and I know where you're naked. That is a sign of insecurity, meaning you have some mental thoughts at that time where you've been insecure about something recently. It's not guaranteed, but there's a likely chance you are. So it's awesome how dreams can kind of help people learn that. And I think there's so many interesting concepts to explore with that, to the point where Freddy Krueger and this franchise can go on for like ever, in my opinion. I have like millions of ideas in my head already for future Nightmare on Elm Street movies. They need to do more, because there's just so much, man, with the concept. Not even talking about Freddy as an icon. He's an awesome icon, but not even him. Just the concept of someone coming into your dreams and killing you is so interesting, because you can do so much creativity with these dreams. And a lot of the movies have done that. Specifically 1 and 3, I think, did the best with it. And then even 2 had some concepts, but they didn't go far with the dream ideas, but they had some cool things. 4, although I didn't like it that much, had a lot of creativity, and 5 and 6 also had a lot of creativity, even though again I don't like them. The new Nightmare came around, still a lot of interesting ideas and things they can play off of. Freddy vs. Jason was definitely its own thing, but it worked. And then the remake was something that had a lot of issues, but also a lot of good to it, so I was okay with it. But it's all we've had. That's all we've had, and I still love this shit as this franchise more than any other franchise. I want to see more of this stuff. Whether it's a remake or it continues on with something, I don't know. I need more. And then moving on to the other aspects of it, like Freddy, he's awesome. He's got such an iconic look to him. I don't think he's more iconic looking than like Chucky, but he's just awesome. You know? I think it's a lot cooler than just a dude with a mask and a knife. I really do. So I don't know, man. I like how he talks too. He's got a personality. Like Michael is just evil. Jason is just a kid who drowned and he's just kind of like, oh, let me hack you with a machete. It works, but this works so much better because when you have a character who talks, it makes the dreams where he's in them so much more interesting. When he's making these funny, lines of dialogue to the characters, like, oh, welcome to primetime, bitch, and he smacks the girl into the TV, like stuff like that you wouldn't get in the Michael Myers movies, you wouldn't get that in the Jason Voorhees movies, you wouldn't get that there because they don't talk, they just kill. They make it work, they do some cool stuff, they give him some personality, like, Michael Myers doing a little head tilt thing, like that works, but I think it works so much better with what they do with this. And of course, even Chucky's the same deal. The guy has dialogue. To me, that makes it just more enjoyable. I don't know. So, hopefully you all enjoyed. Let me know your horror movie franchise ranking in the comment section below. Let me know if you agree or disagree. If you want some honorable mentions, I have a few listed here that I decided to just throw in. I think Saw movies are entertaining, but you need to be in the mood for them, so I don't really want to include them for that reason, because you have to be in the mood. If you're not in the mood, they're terrible. If you're in the mood, they're fun. Candyman, I love the first one so much, but the other three I just didn't care for that much. I think the newer one was fine, I guess, but the middle two were just terrible. But the first one's so good to the point where maybe I could have included it, but I don't. You have to have a consistent franchise to make me, care about it that much. Happy Death Day, it's only been 2 of them, but I really enjoyed the first one and I thought the second one was decent, so thought I would mention it as well. Yeah, that is my horror movie franchise ranking. I'll see you on my next one. Peace out.